responses to the environment. Organisms have the ability to communicate with each other. Different species have their own ways of communicating, such as behavioral patterns, mating, dances, warning calls, or releasing hormones. These mechanisms of communication allow a population to alert others when they sense a change in their environment, which allows the population to avoid harmful instances and contribute to their overall fitness for survival. Energy flow through ecosystems. All organisms in an ecosystem require energy to survive. This energy originates from the sun and then flows through the ecosystems in order to supply each organism with enough energy to survive and reproduce. This energy travels in levels as it passes through the ecosystem, and these levels are called trophic levels. The first level has producers, plants that undergo photosynthesis from the sun's energy. The next level has primary consumers, which are herbivores that eat the producers. Then there are secondary consumers that eat the primary consumers. Then the highest level is composed of tertiary consumers that eat the secondary consumers. This chain of energy flow is very important, and if it's distributed, it can unbalance the entire ecosystem because each level is required in order for energy to pass efficiently and to avoid overconsumption or underconsumption from a single species. In energy systems, two vital factors are required: autotrophs and heterotrophs. These two types of organisms fuel and carry on energy systems, and both are required in order for the system to function. Autotrophs are important to energy flows because they start the chain. All energy originates from the sun, but the other organisms that can directly take in the energy are plants that undergo photosynthesis because they can use the sunlight to create their own food. Once autotrophs have created their own food, population ecology. All organisms need access to food, water, shelter, and oxygen. Without these things, a population cannot survive. If there is a change or shift in the quantity of any of these factors, a population may change. These changes can aid in the growth of a population. If the population is growing rapidly and continuously is growing exponentially, however, for the most part, a population will reach its carrying capacity after growing exponentially, which will allow the population to level out. Effect of density on populations. The density of a population affects and is determined by resources available in the environment. First, these are things like density-dependent factors, which are factors in the environment that affect populations depending on the size of the population. Factors like these can affect the amount of food available to different populations. For example, a small population is less susceptible to a decrease in food than a large population that requires a lot of resources. Then, there are density-independent factors. These are factors that can affect a population regardless of the size. These factors can be things like weather or climate. For example, a forest fire will affect a population no matter the size, and the fire isn't caused based on the population or its size. Both density-dependent and density-independent factors lead to a limit in the number of organisms that can survive in an environment. This limit is known as the carrying capacity. Community ecology. A community is a group of different populations living in the same area. For example, all the humans, deer, and dogs living in Lago Vista is considered a community. A community has many interactions between the populations of species that live there. These interactions can be positive, negative, or neutral. The diversity of a community depends on the amount of different populations in the area, and the more diverse a biome or area is, the better chances the biome has to overcome any harm or disaster that may occur. Interactions within and among populations can influence a community structure. These interactions often group under the category of symbiosis. For example, there are predatory/prey relationships where one organism hunts and the other uses it as food sources in order to gain energy. There are things like competition, which refers to a relationship in which two species are competing for the same habitat, food, or water. Then there is mutualism, where two organisms involved in a relationship both benefit from each other. Then there is commensalism, where one species benefits and the other is not benefiting, but it is also not harmed. The opposite is true for parasitism. It occurs when one organism benefits off the other, while the other is harmed. All of these interactions influence and affect a population's size, which affects the entire community structure. Biodiversity. Biodiversity refers to the amount of diversity in species and within a species in an ecosystem. Ecosystems with a higher level of biodiversity are better able to respond to the changes in their environment. This is due to the fact that higher levels of population diversity offers a greater chance that if something went wrong within the community, at least a few species or organisms would survive, and the species and organisms that did survive could pass on the traits required to survive to their offspring, which would offer more genetic diversity. An increase in genetic diversity always leads to an increase in protection from the environmental changes. Addition or removal of any component of an ecosystem will affect its overall short-term and long-term structure. For example, there are keystone species. Keystone species are species that have a disproportionate effect on the ecosystem. The distribution of keystone species can lead to a catastrophic effect within an ecosystem. The effects are disproportionate to the number of species affected. So, if a keystone species is removed, the ecosystem will suffer from a loss of other organisms which are negatively impact the environment. Disruptions to ecosystems. The most damaging disruption to ecosystems are those created by humans. Our activity has led to the destruction of habitats, extinctions of species, pollution, and climate change. Animals are unable to adapt as quickly to their environments as they are changing, and are also suffering the greatest because of it. Natural changes in environments can also contribute to disruptions within ecosystems. This may include flooding, forest fires, or earthquakes, yet many of these natural occurrences are more frequently because of human influence.